Hi folks, we're Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about something I think is hugely important, and it'll be possibly achieving Armageddon apocalyptic status in the years to come, and that's the relative value of intelligent labor, intelligent workers, high IQ workers. Now, these are people that work with their brains, not with their hands. Now, you can subdivide grunt labor as just straight out laborers digging the ditch, and certified qualified labor, which could be, say, tradespeople like plumbers, electricians, and so on. And the relative importance and power in the overall equation, if you will, and when I say power, I'm talking economic power primarily, but then leading to social power and social control, which is the influence and power of capital. The people who are sitting on piles of money and can mobilize it and can get into cozy backroom deals with governments and so on. In fact, they can own the government. The globalization project is where mass capital owns the Western governments of the world. The United States is the only government at the moment in the entire Western world that isn't completely owned by mass capital. Not that mass capital doesn't have influence there, of course it does, but the government of the United Kingdom, European Union, and so on, they're just completely owned by the fetch and carry flunkies of the globalist cabal. So I wanted to talk here, though, particularly about the relative value of, again, intelligent, high IQ type labor. Now, the high IQ type labor was paid, and rewarded, and so on, based on their capabilities. Now, was it perfect? No, the wastrel nephew of the chairman of the board was still getting cozy gigs, but generally it was people with high IQ capability earned the big bucks. They made the big bucks. They were the ones that were driving the value proposition in terms of exchange of goods and services, and organizational administration, and innovation, invention, and so on. Now, with affirmative action and DEI and so on, the relative value of this labor has changed. That what were once the high IQ sort of high achievers have been increasingly replaced by low IQ affirmative action, the proverbial black lesbian and so on. And there are organizations that years ago I did business with that were populated with a bunch of very smart straight white guys. That you go now, and the proportion of white people working there is 15 or 20%. I recently passed a big bank, or there's a few financial institutions in the city in Sydney, and you pass by, they have these sort of coffee shop, cafe type meetings. We see little groups of people, little teams are out there having their little meeting, and it's a bit of a thing really in this district. And the amount of times you see the Indian Brahmin chick, probably from somewhere around the Punjab, the way they talk, sitting there, heavy, thick Indian accent, and she's in charge of a team of white males, not all of whom look straight, by the way, but the Punjabi thing comes out, and the women, that very Punjabi way of talking, that very Punjabi, and so. So you see how white people are being replaced, and that the people who are replacing them aren't the same quality as the previous stock that were there. They're not the high IQ, high achievers, innovators, experts. Far from it. They're just placeholders. Now, this is increasingly made possible by the reduction of commercial competition. So the economy is more and more being divided amongst centers of capital investment. So competition reduces profits, or can reduce profits if you're not good. So you have to be the best. To be the best, you got to have the best people. But if you take away competition, you then don't need the best people anymore. You can fill the whole, corporate structure can be filled with placeholders, and software can largely run. Checkbox checklist software can. You come in the morning, you fire up the software, and it says, "Okay, have you made the coffee? Tick. Have you done this? Tick, tick, tick." And you just go down and complete your checklist, and that's your job. And that's something that sort of anyone can do. Do you need to know anything, or be capable of anything, or qualified at anything, or certified anything? Well, no. You just run off the software there. So this is very much. And I recently attended like a trade exhibition, software trade exhibition, where they openly say, look, you don't need to know anything about the business. You don't need to know squat. We've got software here that will do it all for you. You just check the boxes and you're rocking and rolling. So this is changing the value of high IQ workers, and AI is artificial intelligence is swinging this even more away from people with capability and moving it more into software and, again, the tick box, checkbox type automation. So this is devaluing the high IQ labor. So the people that are getting the big bucks now are the affirmative action, the diversity, equity, inclusion directors. Some of the highest paid people in the university and education sector, and even in some of the government big quangos, that sort of thing. Some of the highest paid people are the directors of diversity and inclusion. The directors of people that are running the race gender quota systems and that sort of stuff. They're the best paid people, not the people who are actually doing work or delivering value. But the idea of delivering value in a non-competitive environment is very, very different from having to deliver value in a very competitive commercial environment, or even a somewhat competitive. So the value of intelligent labor is diminishing and declining at a fairly rapid rate, and it's going to get worse as artificial intelligence sort of continues to permeate the particularly the Western world. Then we look at the value of grunt labor. Now, grunt labor is just the guys who dig the ditches, people who hold the stop-go signs in the when you're looking at the roadworks and you've got to line up and then stop, slow and go, and all this sort of thing. Those people, and so the value of grunt labor, the ability to mobilize a bunch of low IQ grunt laborers is actually a real thing. It didn't used to be. Governments or any companies just advertise, we want 100 guys to dig holes in the road or something like that, and they would just. But now it's all done through subcontracting. Subcontractors then subcontract to third world sort of sleazy villains and so on. That's used then backfills through the immigration system to bring in these low IQ grunt laborers that are paid shit money, and there's all sorts of scams and sleazy stuff going on there. So the value of labor at the entry level, and same can be said for people, say, that work in takeout food stores and so on, the value there that otherwise would have more or less held up because the demand is certainly there. This can, to some extent, to some minimal extent, you can replace some of these labouring jobs, especially where there's a service type element rather than just straight grunt. You can replace that. For example, you go to takeout food shops and you use those online menus there to order your stuff instead of having to go to someone at the front counter. You can replace some, but you can't replace all the jobs. The burger flipping and the cooking the fries and doing all that. There's only a limit to how much you can automate. I'm sure that'll get more sophisticated over time. There's a limit. So grunt labour is still needed. So they've devalued grunt labour by mass immigration. So that's being devalued at that end. You've got an area of grunt labour that they haven't successfully infiltrated yet, but they're not from lack of trying, by the way, which is the tradespeople, like, again, the electricians and the plumbers. I don't know how you're ever going to automate that, where there are just too many variables that you automate. Now, I'm sure again that'll get more sophisticated over time, but you got someone to crawl around, checking your pipes and fixing this and doing that. That just the struggles with automating and artificial intelligence, that sort of stuff, it's tough. So what they'll do is they'll lower the standard for entry into it, into becoming a tradesperson. They'll try and subvert it that way, but it's still not really going to work. They haven't found a way yet of subverting the tradespeople type things. So where there's more predictable things like, say, mechanics, there they've been able to somewhat infiltrate that because there's a lot of diagnostic machines and so on. So the mechanics knowledge in diagnostics has become less important than plugging in the computer to interrogate all the sensors and so on in an engine and in the electrics and what. So where I'm getting at is here that the reality is that labour is being devalued, and that concentrations of capital, more and more power will swing, influence and control will swing to capital. Not that capital hasn't always had influence; it has a lot of influence. But there have been you can't do things without the capability of the high IQ people. The way things are developing at the moment, most of those people will be and can already be bypassed. And so, two things you need there. Firstly, we can't have commercial competition in the market. We've got to get rid of that, which has largely taken place across most of the Western world, which means you don't need the best people. And then how can you replace at least the middle and upper echelons of the high IQ workers? And that can be done through, again, checkbox software and artificial intelligence. And that artificial intelligence thing hasn't fully played out yet. For example, there's many, law clerking and operational folks in the, legal secretaries, that sort of thing. People working in law libraries to find precedent cases that the lawyer can then argue in court. Artificial intelligence can replace a lot of that work, and that was pretty high IQ work. So that can be replaced, along with many other jobs. Also, a lot of middle and upper middle management jobs are now seen as just check-a-box software. Again, artificial intelligence replacing that. Report writing. There's a whole section, teaching, all that sort of stuff. Artificial intelligence is infiltrating, or to what extent it might replace most or all of it, that's yet to be determined. But that it's happening is undeniable. But the effect of these things happening will be to increase the supremacy of capital in the equation. Capital needs sort of market opportunity. It needs the intelligent workers to put the stuff together. Grunt workers are easier to come by, but the intelligent workers to put the thing together. And of course, the capital and then the final part, the acquiescence of government. Well, they've got pretty much all that now. Commercial competition's gone. They've got the acquiescence of government. Getting all those politicians and lining them up for nice waterfront properties. That's an amazing sort of aphrodisiac for getting them to agree to all sorts of things and getting it legislated so they have the force of law to support them, which means people who disagree can be put in prison and that sort of stuff. Very important so that gives capital a sort of protection, and of course they have the protection that they don't have to compete and they get cozy government contracts. So mobilisation of capital is going to be, if it isn't already, is going to achieve total supremacy. And this is what we see, I think, in the globalist cabal. But it also means that loyalty to the globalist program, which is reflected in things like director of diversity and director of affirmative action and so on and so, those will be the best paid jobs, and they will be the only well-paid jobs remaining. Surely there'll be a small handful of AI programmers or the coders, but there'll be a minuscule number of those compared to. So I see the value add high IQ jobs as the ones that are under the biggest threat, as in the jobs won't exist anymore. Whereas the labouring jobs, particularly the grunt labour jobs, that'll be artificially devalued by the continued mass immigration, which the globalists are absolutely grimly determined to continue with, no matter what the collateral damage may be. And again, this puts capital, which is only a very small number of people, this puts capital in the absolute driver's seat plus. And I see that's the way we're going. And I see this as the Armageddon scenario that we're facing. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.